Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from the WeatherBrains corporate headquarters. You know what this is, WeatherBrains, the weekly show all about weather. This is the pre-show. An amazing time here. This is where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. It's been a very busy evening here as we have had summer storms, and occasionally summer storms can become severe. And no tornadoes down here in the deep south with those things. Well, I say no tornadoes. We actually had a tornado warning Saturday evening, but as it turns out, there was no tornado. But we've had flooding problems, and we have had damaging wind problems. And now that the sun is getting low and the air is more stable, we're slowly getting things under control here, but it's been a very busy couple of hours. I mean, I've not had the chance to think. So we're getting the embed code online, which we have just done, so we can be on television. And let's get our guests on the line with us. In fact, where I happen to be here, we're under a flash flood warning right now at the TV station. So busy. So here we go. Let's invite and let's use email. And we'll get our cast of characters on the show tonight. We start with Mr. Murray because he is the guy that is our guest booking officer. All right. I think everybody's been invited, so we'll see if we can find some folks to join us here. So what is the Independence Day weekend, July 4th? This year is about half over. It's the year that never stops. The year that keeps on giving. Just saw some tweet from, I think, the BBC or somebody said there was a flu virus that might lead to another global pandemic. I just didn't even want to look at that. I just don't want to look at that. I'm trying to find happier tweets, which is hard to find these days. We live in a very angry society. I mean, very mad people. So hopefully on this WeatherBrains show tonight, we can give you a laugh or two and have a moment of levity in the midst of hard times. So, Bill, what's the backstory on Wet Willie coming on the show next week? I think you explained it last week, but it went over my head. So,
well, the backstory. Let me make sure I got my mic right here. Hang on, I turn off the camera for a second because I don't want you to see that I don't have on pants. All right, let's see.
Whoa! Show title, and see, we the best show titles are during the pre-show. And I am wearing pants. I can prove that because I can stand up.
Well, I was just kidding, but I didn't want you to look at my gut while I was getting my mic arranged here. There's Jen there, more.
Hi, guys.
And you know, she's Columbus, Ohio, James, but she's not anymore. She's not from Columbus anymore. She's from Flavortown.
Flavortown.
What? They're changing the name of Columbus to Flavortown.
Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
For Guy Fieri. No, they got a petition going. Have you signed it yet, Jennifer?
No.
Come, how could you? It's going to be Flavortown. That's a great name.
I've never heard that. I have not heard this.
Google it.
See, Bill, Bill is trying to bait us now. He's trying to lead us down a bad path, and we are not going down that path.
Bait you. No, you look it up. There's a petition to name Columbus, Ohio, Flavortown.
Oh my gosh.
Back me up here, Chris.
Hey, Jen, do not go down this path. He's trying to bait you into saying something.
Taylor knows what's going on, old man.
You are going to be canceled by who knows. So just don't even go there.
When you come out and when you're driving into your city limits in a couple of weeks and it says "Welcome to Flavortown."
Look at Taylor's cat back there. This is awesome.
Taylor lives like in a mansion.
Chris.
Hey, Jen, good to see you again.
It's so good to see you.
This
Chris,
show
can you
is
hear?
Mr.
Can you hear us?
Fault-
Okay.
Mr.
Yes,
Chris
sir.
Fallon's
Can you hear
fault.
me?
Yeah, man.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
So you asked me how Wet Willie's gotten on this show. And Wet Willie is on the show because I just used a line that you and I probably used 1,000 times in the forecast. And, all I said was on my forecast, I said, for next weekend, do what you want to do. That's all I said, as Wet Willie would say, do what you want to do. And that caught the attention of their publicist. And so
I'm trying to see, does anybody on this show know who Wet Willie is? Other
Jen's
than me
become a
and
big
Bill?
fan because she checked it out after last week's show.
it was
and she
good.
reported.
Yeah.
I know
Really good.
Taylor has never heard of Wet Willie.
No.
No. Chris, you ever
Chris
heard of
has
Wet Willie?
gotten a few Wet Willies, probably.
Show title.
I won't admit to that.
So when I was a child, I used to growing up through high school and college to work my way through, I played rock and roll music on the radio, which is a really weird job, but it was fun. And they paid me to do it, $1.90 an hour. And one of the big bands in that era was Wet Willie. This was the Southern rock era. And you had, Leonard Skinner and the Marshall Tucker Band and all these Southern rock groups, the Allman Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them, they were on Capricorn Records and they recorded out of Macon, Georgia. And Wet Willie came along in the mid 70s and they had their first hit was called Keep On Smiling.
Still their biggest hit too.
Summer of 1974, which was the year that I graduated from high school. That's how old I am. But they had several hits. And again, Weekend was a big hit. That was the summer of 79. But the lead singer is a guy named Jimmy Hall. And I guess he's coming on the show, right?
Yeah. And we just got to convince him to play the harmonica, just a few bars and Keep On Smiling. That's all I want.
I think he should do the whole song. I mean.
No, I agree. But I saw this really fascinating documentary, as I probably told too many times in the last week, about President Carter's election having, those bands had a lot to do with it. Not necessarily Wet Willie so much, but definitely Greg Allman and the Allman Brothers played benefit concerts on behalf of Jimmy Carter in the summer of 76.
You might look.
And they could take that money that they raised
of
with
them.
those concerts.
Look in there.
And because of the federal election matching funds, they could buy ads the next morning. And, it was really important in that political campaign. And there's something that I didn't even know. Being a fan of history, I'd never heard that. And I thought that was fascinating. So I'm sure we'll have lots to ask Jimmy about.
And see, that's the kind of boring personal story we share on the pre-show right here. You don't get this on any other weather podcast, but right here.
That was
Every one of these stories is boring. I mean,
All right, but I got to correct the record. Bill's right about flavors. You're right.
See?
My crack research staff just sent me the link. There's a petition to honor Columbus native Guy. Was it Fieri?
Yeah. Come on,
Yeah.
Span. You gotta get with the current events, James.
no.
I
So
live
what
here and
good
I
is
know.
what good is it to comment on this? What good could come out of that?
Because
I
we
mean,
get to honor Jen
The
Nairmore,
only
our
thing,
newest parent.
the only thing that'll come out of commenting on something like that is trouble, and I'm not going down
Now,
that path.
what could come out of trouble out of Guy Fieri and his little Trans Am or whatever he drives around in? What could come trouble out of that?
If
Famous
only
last
you
words,
get the
right?
email, if only you get the messages I get, you would understand. It's just I leave my mouth shut these days. So, Taylor, you're
Yeah,
not going to sleep tonight, are you?
probably not. Not much. I took a nap earlier though, so I planned for it.
We've had some excitement. We've had a severe thunderstorm warnings and flash flood warnings. It's been
I am
exciting.
in a
know.
flash flood warning. Thank you very much.
Um,
It's not going to flash
Yeah, well-
flood.
Yeah, I looked out the window and there's a guy just walking down the road with his umbrella during the middle of the severe thunderstorm warning, lightning striking all around.
See,
What are you
I-
doing?
I would have called him a bonehead, but you're nice. I mean, your tweet was
I
nice. I would have
I
gone.
almost took a picture of him. I couldn't catch him in time, or I was gonna just send that picture onto social media.
I was sitting on the front porch, but that wasn't very smart either. So,
But out of all the working at home meteorologists, Taylor has the best decor.
I was going
mean,
to
it's like-
say, she looks like she lives in a mansion.
she does. And it's like, I just want to take a screen grab of her place and put it behind me on my green wall at my house. I mean,
Is that for real,
know-
Tyler? We made one of the guests do that a couple of weeks ago. We made her walk back into her space because we didn't believe that it looked as nice as she said it. We thought it was one of those Zoom backgrounds from Architectural Digest or something.
no, it's just real. All right, let's get this
Impressive.
thing rolling here. It is
Hey,
time.
Captain, welcome to the show. Can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you guys hear me all right?
You
Awesome.
bet. Good to see
Yeah.
you.
You too.
All right, so here we go. Be sure I got the record buttons going on here. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is WeatherBrains, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is episode number 754 for the 29th of June, 2020. We are so delighted that you are here. We have an all-star cast on the show this week, as you can see. Let's start with Jen. Jen, what is on your mind? Just say it.
What's on my mind today? It's getting hotter. I'm up here in Ohio and it's starting to get a little bit more steamy. It looks like we're going to get hot many locations the next couple of weeks. But it's not fun. I was out doing the mulch today for a couple hours. So I've tried to find a couple of cooler hours, but I got a little bit of sun today. But no, that's about it. Just doing my thing and not a lot of tornadoes. We're about to put in about 25 more tornadoes that have occurred over the past couple of weeks, but they've been very sporadic. We're putting that on the website, but not a whole lot happening. So I'm liking it. Very quiet.
Okay, well, good. We hit 94 down here today.
Mhm.
And, I work out at midday on an artificial turf field. And I think I sweated 10 pounds off today. The dew point was about 72. The temperature was about 92 at the time. So I was feeling summer today. But for where we are, most of June has been below average. So I'm not complaining. Aubrey, you're back. We've missed you.
Yay.
Welcome.
I know.
Welcome.
I know. So the first Monday I was getting ready to take about a week off. And then last Monday I was recovering from having almost a week off and getting caught back up. So I am back.
Yeah, you
tell us
spend
about
a
your
week
adventures.
preparing, you spend a week off, and then you spend a week getting back.
Tell us about your adventures. The photos were great.
We did a staycation. So last year I ended up traveling out to Montana to see my childhood best friend who I grew up with in Connecticut. So this year she came out here, which ended up working out very well since I technically really can't even go anywhere. I don't even think I'd be allowed to get on a plane right now unless I quarantined for a couple weeks when I got back. So worked out this year and we basically did a staycation all across the Shenandoah Valley. We did 2 days up at the national park. So I've now driven the entire 100 miles of the national park. We did a lot of hiking. We did Natural Bridge, Virginia, went up to West Virginia, Blackwater Falls State Park, relaxed, had some nice evenings. We had that upper low overhead that week. And I was really nervous at first that we would get washed out. Never hit a drop of rain in 6 days.
Ooh,
It
you're good.
never impacted our plan. So I kind of redid our itinerary that first Monday, which is why I wasn't on the show. And it was fantastic. So a nice staycation in such a great area where there really is so much to do here.
That is an amazing place. We actually broke down in Natural Bridge, Virginia. We were on a bus taking 12-year-olds to Cooperstown, New York. Why we did that, I must have been off my meds. Do you know how bad that bus smelled after about the first 2 hours? But anyway, the thing broke down, and they were the nicest people at that. There was a really nice inn or some type of facility right there off the interstate, and they fed us, and they were just so nice until the next bus came to pick us up. So that was great. But no, you don't need to leave. I mean, you were in the Shenandoah Valley. I mean, that's a destination spot. All right, so let's see here. Trying to think what we're missing Troy. He's
Good to see you,
absent
Chris.
without leave.
Yeah, Aubrey.
But Bill, go ahead and bring in our guests. I see some very important people here we need to talk to.
Yeah, James. First, I want to welcome one of your associates. Taylor Serralo was in charge of tonight's show, which got moved. So there's a very complex set of events that caused tonight to happen. But of course, Taylor is a meteorologist in James's shop here in Birmingham at ABC 3340. And we're so glad you could join us tonight, Taylor.
Thank you for having me.
And you grew up in Plano, Texas, right? But ended
I
up
was
in Georgia.
born. I was born in Plano, Texas.
You were
but
born
I
there.
moved
Okay.
super young, so I don't remember living in Plano, but I was raised in Georgia, north
So
of Atlanta.
That's the one thing we have in common, Bill. We both lived in Plano. Now, Taylor has no memory of it. I barely have memory of it because it was so long ago, but I was there too, back in the 80s. Yeah. When I worked for Channel 4 News, Dallas, Fort Worth.
And Taylor will be back on September 14th when her show will actually get to happen. So
Yeah.
really excited about that. But she didn't want to miss tonight either because we've got a really fun and exciting show. So several weeks ago.
And by the way, Bill Troy just showed up. Look who just
I don't see
joining us.
Troy. Yeah,
There he
I must be on
He is-
delay. I'm on the 20-second delay here. Troy.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Good to see everyone.
Good to see you. What's happening in Austin, Texas tonight?
Nothing. Just finished my evening walk. Sorry, I'm a minute or two late. It's been pretty good. African dust, like everyone else. Friday into Saturday, rather. And other than that, not bad. 90 or 91 degrees today. So, I grabbed a coat before I went out. So, it's not much happening. Pretty quiet, pretty stable weather pattern around here.
So we beat you in the ham here today. We're 94, Troy. So we.
Oh, really?
We bested you. That's kind of unusual.
Yeah, just wait till about July the 31st. We're 137. We'll have the ham beat.
Well, I'm glad you could join us tonight,
Yeah.
Troy. So, and I've got an exciting announcement a little bit later in the show, so we'll talk about that. But
what do I need to play the breaking news jingle? Is
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I better clear it with you before I go breaking news on this.
Yeah,
thing,
we're not going to.
Bill, why would you want to do that?
Well, it kind of is James's show, so better check with him before we go break it or anything. But several weeks ago, we wished we had a hurricane hunter. And of course, one of our most loyal fans, I don't know if he's really a fan, but he listens to the show a lot. And he's a great friend of WeatherBrains, of course. He was on shows 447, 653, and 702. Chris, you get up there in Alec Baldwin territory now. You've been on the show a bunch, but you are doing a lot of cool things. Chris White, we welcome you back to WeatherBrains.
It's good to be here. It's also hot here in Roanoke. I think we hit 91 today. So
yeah. That's these low 90s, mid 90s are getting too common, but I guess it's called June across America. So are you still part of the chase team up there, Chris? Are you doing that for the Hokies still? Or you do?
No, my last chase with Virginia Tech Storm Chasers was 2 years ago. I am chasing in conjunction with the local CBS station here, so I do provide them live stream and reports.
That's really cool. Well, I didn't realize you had some self-published storm chasing books and stuff too that are out there.
Well, I wouldn't admit to a lot of that. None of them are Pulitzer Prize winning things, but most of them were just accounts of my experiences, both here in Virginia chasing and out west on some family chases, and then with the Hokies as well. Just a way for me to put down on paper some of the things that I wanted to remember.
Well, we were really excited that you were able to get your relative tonight, Captain Kelsey Carpenter, who is one of the hurricane hunters. Captain Carpenter, welcome to the show. And I don't think I can hear him, or maybe something's wrong.
I hope you guys can hear me.
There we go. Now we got you.
Yeah, no, we can.
I got two kids.
Yes.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I might need to relocate and get closer to my router. I got two kids that are eating up the Wi-Fi right now. So
there you go. So what are they playing? Are they playing Fortnite, or what are they doing?
Minecraft and Fortnite, both.
That's
both
probably what's going on upstairs here
popular,
too.
yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that we'll get one of those $3 million world championships out of it. I don't know about you, Captain. But.
Hey, you never know. I mean, college is a good idea. So is the military. But if you can make a living doing that, then I'm happy with that. So.
Now, were you interested in weather as a kid?
I was one of the kids that I'm sure you all can relate. I was the kid on the front porch watching the thunderstorm in the summertime, and
Okay, I feel better.
I was lucky enough to where Twister came out when I was about 12 years old. So
Another Twister graduate.
I'm pretty sure that summer I watched it every single day. So yeah, I've been interested in weather for a long time, and I've only been doing the tropical weather aspect of it for the last 5 years or so. But I've got almost 20 years of weather experience at this point.
So where did you grow up? Yeah.
Virginia, actually. I'm a Virginia boy,
Mhm.
graduate of James Madison University.
That's my area.
That's right. And I grew up in Manassas, Virginia, in the DC area, and spent the first half of my military career in the Virginia Air National Guard out of Richmond. So Virginia boy up until about 5 years ago. Now I'm a Mississippi boy, and it's very, very hot. You guys were talking about heat earlier. I'm not sure how many of you have been to the Gulf Coast, but it's a different kind of heat down here.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's a sauna the whole time. So
That's a
I saw
beautiful
that
part of
the heat index was like up near 90 at 8 in the morning this morning down there.
it was actually I was because we I work on base. I don't live on base here in Biloxi, but we get notifications whenever they issue what's called the black flag, which basically means that airmen and military members can't work out. It's too hot. So on a normal summer day, you get that around 10:30, 11 o'clock maybe. Today it was 7:30. We got that warning. So
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's not good when you get the
No.
black flag. So
No.
I think we live in black flag conditions a good bit of the summer around here too, James. Probably
I
when
bet.
you're out there on that AstroTurf field, James, at noon.
Exactly. Black flag, black flag.
So how did you end up becoming a hurricane hunter? Is it something you volunteer for? Is it something they choose you for? I was watching the Paul Tibbets movie. This will date me. The one about the atomic bomb and the Manhattan Project last night. Gave me nightmares all night. But he was kind of chosen for that project, in 1943. So is it something you're chosen for, something you volunteer for? How do you get to be one?
Yeah, it's a lot of people don't know that the Air Force Hurricane Hunters, it's actually part of the Air Force Reserves. So it's not a job that you get assigned to or PCS to. You actually have to apply for it and go in front of a board and interview. So I was down here for a weather training class for weather officers. And again, please let me know if I'm breaking up. I'll try to fix it. And I just found out they had an opening, and I applied for it. I met a board, and thankfully, they accepted me, and I've been doing it for the last 5 years. But before that, I'd been in the Air Force weather world for almost 13 years to that point. So kind of had it in. I kind of knew the way the Air Force weather world worked, and this is kind of the pinnacle job that I don't know if I'm going to really look backwards at this point.
So when you say you were in the Air Force weather world, what do you mean by that?
Well, I enlisted in the Virginia Air National Guard at high school, so back in 2002. So I did 12 years as an enlisted weather forecaster guy while I was working on my degree from JMU up in Virginia. And then once I became an officer, eventually made the move down here. So I've got between the enlisted weather forecasting job and my current job as a hurricane hunter, I've got 18 years of Air Force weather experience.
Talk about your training. I want to hear about that. I know it's different than going into the weather service or generally broadcast. Talk about how that process works on the Air Force side.
Sure. So specifically for this job, one thing I didn't really realize until I was kind of past the point of no return is you sort of check your ego at the door and leave all your weather knowledge behind, because the first 6 months of your job, you don't talk about weather. You don't talk about hurricanes. You become a crew member of the C-130 crew. So you learn how to become a crew member, how to work with the rest of your crew. You learn all the aspects of your airplane. You memorize lots and lots of emergency procedures, and you learn how to be they call them crew dogs. You learn how to be a crew dog. So you're not just the weather guy on the plane. You're also part of the overall mission. So that was kind of the first part of training that they obviously told me about it before we started, but I didn't really grasp what that meant, because we had to go to survival school, both land and water survival. And we have to spend time in the altitude chamber. and stuff like that. So kind of the flight, the medical aspect of it is a lot different. You basically follow a very similar medical screening process that a pilot does. So it's pretty hard. We've had lots of people that we would love to hire, but for whatever reason they couldn't pass certain aspects of the medical side of it. So that part of the training is very rigid and very specific. And then once you get past that point is when you really start focusing on the tropical weather aspect of it. And it's all in-house. We're one of the few shops in the Air Force, the entire Air Force, where we don't have a school to be a hurricane hunter. Everything is taught in-house by your fellow weather officers that have been doing it for a while. So it's all on the job training. It's all your progression through the training process is determined by how many storms there are that year. If there aren't many storms, then you're gonna have to wait till next year to get qualified and fully certified.
Talk about all the roles on a plane, on a mission. How many crew members are there, Captain? And talk about what those jobs are real quick.
Sure. So the standard crew is 2 pilots and a navigator up front. So that's the 3 up front. And then in the back of the airplane is the load master, which is our only enlisted guy or gal. Everybody else is officer. And then my specific job is called an aerial reconnaissance weather officer, or ARWO. So that's our standard crew. For a lot of our storm missions, that it could be kind of long. My longest mission is about 11 and a half hours. But the average mission is probably a good 8 hours, I would say. So a lot of times the pilots will, maybe add an additional person or 2 because they need to rest. Maybe an extra navigator. There's normally only 1 ARWO on board, unless we're being instructed. So it's a new student or a check ride or something like that. So typically 5 to 7 people for an actual storm mission is what we have.
So I have a question. The whole reason I'm a meteorologist is because of hurricanes. I love them. Mm-hmm. And I was tracking them when I was 12. I lived in Florida and I went to get, the little grocery store and picked up the chart and woke myself up in the middle of the night to track everything. So I think this is fascinating. So thank you for being on here.
Sure.
I'm just curious to know, what are some of the hurricanes that you've flown missions through?
Well, I got to be careful when I say this. I was lucky enough, relatively speaking, to come in during a very active time. I came in, my first storm season was 2016. So I started right off the bat with Hurricane Matthew. And then in 17, it was Maria and Irma and Harvey. And I've seen some pretty big storms. I mean, I flew Dorian last year. I flew Michael 2 years ago. So a lot of the people that I work with that have been there for a while, they went through a bit of a drought after 2005-ish, the late 2000s. There was a bit of a drought for big storms, and then it's kind of ramped back up. So again, that's why I say I'm from a nerdy weather perspective, I've been lucky enough to fly some really cool storms. Obviously, the people that were affected, it's not so lucky for them, but pretty cool storms. One of the cool things about the job is we don't just fly in the Caribbean or the Atlantic. We also fly out towards Hawaii in the Eastern Pacific. So I've flown, and those storms are interesting. They're different than the ones on the East Coast or the Caribbean. They're a lot more, they have a lot more room to operate, less land interaction, and they can get really, really big and really, really well organized. So I've flown some really cool storms on the way to Hawaii. And Hawaii rarely gets hit. Even when it looks like a giant storm is heading right for the islands, they always get missed. So, which is nice for them. But yeah, I would say my favorite storms that I've flown have all been in the Eastern Pacific.
So are you in charge of the drop sons, putting those instruments? How does that work? How does that process work?
Sure. So once we get in the storm environment, obviously the pilots are in charge of the airplane. And then in every flight has what's called an aircraft commander. So they're in charge of the whole crew and the airplane. But once we get into the storm environment and we're actually beginning our whatever operation we're doing for that specific storm, we are considered the flight director at that point. The RWO is. So yes, I direct all the drop sons. The load master is the one that actually physically puts it in the tube and pushes the button to release it. But one of my jobs is to find, looking at radar and every aspect of the storm that we're looking at, my job is to kind of find out where we want to drop, make sure we get the eye wall, try to maximize the potential to get the eye wall winds, the maximum surface winds. And then also the center drop is really, really important too, because that'll give us trying to find the lowest pressure possible. And if you know it's a good mission, if or a good pass through the storm on that particular mission, if you get a center drop sonde with the lowest pressure you've seen so far, and then also as minimal winds as possible, because that means you're the dead center of the eye. That's kind of what we shoot for.
Right. Well, hey, Kelsey, it's good to see you again.
Hey, Chris.
We were talking offline before we got on the show, and trying to remember the last time we'd seen each other. It was probably 25 years ago.
I think so, yeah.
Oh my goodness, it's a reunion.
That's right.
Yeah. Kelsey is actually the son of one of my first cousins, if that gives you the idea. Different generations, so we didn't connect a lot when he was younger. One note I will throw out too, and maybe it's a family thing. My dad actually flew Hurricanes when he was in the Air Force back out in 1948 out of Bermuda, and that was flying converted World War II bombers into that. So that was part of his missions.
Nice.
But Kelsey, Jen almost stole my question because I was going to ask about drop sondes too. But my question was really more once the drop sonde is released and you have the data being fed back to you, what format does your data? Do you actually see the data? Do you get like text and everything, or do you get a graphical display? What does that look like?
The answer is both. So what happens whenever a drop sonde is released? The first level of quality control is the load master. It comes out of their pallet, their drop pallet, and their equipment. So as soon as it's released, we get GPS uplink, and it starts reporting winds within the first 10 seconds or so. And his or her job is to make sure that it's good data. It's getting not only winds and speed and direction, but also pressure, temperature, and dew point. Once it hits the surface of the ocean, and they are able to verify that it's a good drop and that it's good data, they'll send it over to us, and we get it first in the raw text of the temp code drop is what they call it. But we also have the ability to take that data, just click a few buttons, and we can see it in QT format. We can see it in Braywinson or reverse QT format, and a lot of different visuals we have available to us. But especially in the storm environment when we're really busy, there are a few. I focus primarily on the raw data. There's probably 7 or 8 data points that I'm zeroing in on to make sure are good. That's when I then send it off the airplane down to the Hurricane Center, and they'll do a third level of QC for it, and then pump it into the models. The models that will eventually forecast where the storm's going.
Gotcha. And one more question about those. How many, on a typical mission, how many drop sondes do you carry with you, and how many do you normally release?
Well, we always carry as many as we can, just because it's not unusual to have one fail, especially like when we drop it into a really strong storm with a really well-developed eye wall. A lot of times they get beat up pretty good, and we might lose connection. And if you lose connection for a few seconds, the data gets all jacked up, and it's not good. So we'll bring more than we need. And then, so for a standard mission, let's say it's a storm off the East Coast, maybe for like Hurricane Florence from a couple of years ago, we'll typically do 4 passes through the center of the storm. And then we'll do drops at each turn point, and then we'll do drops at each eye wall pass, and then each center drop. So normally between like 12 and 16 drops is for a standard mission. And sometimes the Hurricane Center, who we're kind of talking with the whole time via the old school, almost like instant messenger chat, they'll say, hey, can you go back to the northwest quadrant and drop there again? We want to see what the winds are like there. And so we can move our path and our whatever the forecasters ultimately are looking for.
Thanks.
Hey, let me ask a question, because so many of us are used to the radio signs we put up on the balloons. Kind of describe for people that are listening the difference between a radio sign that we're used to dealing with and a drop sign that goes down out of the airplane. It's got to be a huge difference in the mechanical structure of the thing.
It's actually not as big as you would think. It's really just the opposite direction. It gives pretty much the same information. And then I'm not sure what algorithms go into it to sort of display the different data points visually. But it's really, we look at the same data. The load master and myself will look at the same data, and he might have this QT version on his computer, and I'll have the kind of reverse QT visual on mine, and we can compare the two. So it's gathering the same data. It's just going down instead of up.
What about the mechanical housing that it's in?
It's a very expensive paper towel roll that's got a lot of
Show title. Must be getting exciting in the Minecraft
It's got a parachute
world.
that deploys whenever it drops. It falls. That's right. It falls at about 2,500 feet per second, and gives you the same data pretty much.
And what percentage of them fail?
That's a good question, and it kind of varies year to year. Depends on what batch we're using, as we buy them from the producer, and some batches are better than others. I would say on a good year, probably less than 10% will fail. Unfortunately, there's been, and again, a lot of it depends on the type of mission we're flying. The stronger the storm, the more turbulent the eye wall. They tend to get beat up a little bit more, just because as soon as they get dropped, they get carried hundreds of thousands of meters away. So we can kind of lose that connection, and the data fails a little bit.
And one more question for me on this go round, Captain. How bumpy is that ride? I think everybody's been on a Hurricane Hunter craft, but me. I've never been on one. So
I haven't either.
I would assume it's a C-130. How bad is it up there? What's it like?
I mean, that's obviously kind of the most common question that we get, and I'd like to just tell people it's as bad as you would expect it to be. Some storms are worse than others, and what people don't necessarily understand about hurricanes is there are, even a well-developed hurricane, there are breaks between the rain bands. So you've got times where there's no turbulence at all, and we've got a really well developed radar, so we can see what's in front of us, and we can kind of avoid the larger areas that might cause us problems, particularly like the elevated mesocyclones that might have tornadoes below them. We don't want to fly through those at 10,000 feet, because they would kick our butt at the same time. So we can sort of snake in and out of those. And I also like to tell people that, surprisingly, it's almost bumpier on maybe a weak tropical storm, or a Cat 1 hurricane that is weakening to a tropical storm. Anytime a storm is either weakening or strengthening or changing latitude, a lot of times that's where your turbulence comes from. So I flew Cat 5 Dorian, which is one of the most powerful storms we've seen in our lifetime. And it actually wasn't nearly as bumpy as some of the tropical storms I've flown, because you've got a lot more convection in those types of storms, and a lot more uncertainty, where some stuff you can't even pick up on radar. It's just falling and sinking air or rising air, whether it's getting stronger or starting to weaken. So that's the hardest part, is when you can't see it on radar and you're not prepared for it. That's when you get bumped around pretty good.
So do you have velocity and reflectivity on your radar, or just reflectivity, or what?
We've got just reflectivity, but we also have wind shear maps under that, and turbulence maps and that kind of thing. But yeah, no velocity, unfortunately.
Now,
Captain,
you mentioned, I'm sorry, Troy, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say one thing that you mentioned a second ago. I've heard, Captain, from some other people that have hitched the ride occasionally, is that the weaker systems sometimes are the ones that jar your teeth out. While, the stronger ones, you're surprised. It's sometimes maybe not the lack of turbulence, but not as bad as what you might have expected.
Yeah, that's true. I like to describe it kind of like NASCAR. I'm not a huge NASCAR fan, but I know enough about it to where I can speak with some sort of intelligence. So the larger tracks like Daytona, where it's a massive track and everybody's going 210, 15 miles an hour, it's a little bit easier to predict what's going to happen. Whereas if you have the smaller track, like a tropical storm where cars are moving in and out and trying to change direction, that's where you have more wrecks and maybe more uncertainty. Whereas the stronger storms, you can kind of, what's coming.
Bill, I interrupted you. Back to you.
No, and then there's Talladega, James fan, and you can never predict what's going to happen. Yeah, but Captain, I heard one of the pilots say that going through the southern eye wall of Michael during landfall was a really harrowing experience. Have you heard? Were you on that mission, or have you heard that too?
I wasn't. I flew Michael kind of earlier on in his progression. I think he was a Cat 2 or 3 when I flew him. But yeah, that's another aspect too. Once you start to get land interaction, everything
Yeah.
changes. I mean, I heard from people that have been around longer than me that flew Katrina. As soon as Katrina hit the shelf on the southern Gulf Coast, it flattened out like a pancake, and the turbulence got really bad. Same thing with hurricane / superstorm Sandy. A buddy of mine who's been around for a while said that was by far the roughest storm he ever flew, because once it started to take on subtropical characteristics and get to that certain latitude up by New Jersey and New York, it changed the entire game. So yeah, as soon as you have land interaction, especially down in the Bay of Campeche or some maybe like Haiti or Jamaica, when it can hamper the development of the storm, but it can also cause uncertainty as far as turbulence and that kind of thing.
So, and I guess this, stands to reason, but, has there ever been a hurricane or a storm that you were concerned about the aircraft or about you and your crew's safety at some point?
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't be honest if I said no. Especially earlier on in my career. I'm 5 or 6 years in now, so I have a much better understanding of what's happening with the airplane itself. It kind of goes back to, we're trained on not just how to do our weather job, but also how a C-130 is supposed to sound, how it's supposed to feel. So that kind of comes over time. You sort of what's a good sound and what's a bad sound kind of thing. So earlier on in my career, I was flying. I can't remember if it was Hurricane Madeline or Hurricane Lester. It was out in the Eastern Pacific, approaching Hawaii, and I was a very new RWO, and I was qualified, but I was very new, and I had a very seasoned set of pilots in the front of the airplane. They had been around and flown all kinds of crazy storms over the years. And the minute that I started to detect some discomfort in their voices is when I got a little nervous. Because I figured if they sound a little nervous or uncertain of what's going to happen, then I'm kind of freaking out right now. But we kind of, the nice thing is when we communicate with the National Hurricane Center, they understand it. Hey, if it gets too hairy, if we're not comfortable, they fully support us. If we decide as a as a crew that we need to turn around, then they say, okay, whatever you think is the best for safety of flight, do what you got to do.
We have an excellent track record, and we need to keep it that way for many, many decades. So let's keep it that way. I'm interested, Chris, you said your father flew. Those missions were a little different back then. They truly were hunting for hurricanes back then, because that was a primary defense in the process of forecasting.
For sure. Yeah.
I was going to say, it was, and it was probably a little anticlimactic after flying combat missions over Europe, though.
That's true. That is very true. There's no question about that. Yes, please go, Aubrey.
So, Captain, can you tell us exactly what you guys do maybe in kind of the off season? Are you still training? Are you still flying around? Are you trying to find winter storms to fly into? What exactly are you guys doing on the off season once hurricane season ends?
All the above. I would say the three primary off-season missions are: one, everybody's got to stay current. The pilots, myself as an RWO, the navigator, we all have currency requirements. So we have to fly every certain days, do certain aspects of our mission to stay current. So that's one thing. Also, the airplanes have to run. So it's just like anything. The airplanes have to stay current themselves. But we do fly winter storms as well. And one of the I'm not sure if you all have heard of these, but the atmospheric rivers on the West Coast have become a big focus. It's actually been integrated into one of our official government documents that guide what we do, that we now fly those every year. So those are, for those that aren't familiar, those are mid-level rivers of moisture that cause torrential flooding and mudslides and that kind of thing, all on the West Coast, primarily in California. So we're doing a lot of those missions in the wintertime. And then a big aspect of what we do is we have to calibrate our equipment. So we have particular pieces of equipment on our airplane that require some pretty robust calibrations in the off season to make sure they're ready to go come storm season.
So can you go back to the atmospheric rivers? What exactly are you looking for? Are you just sampling data?
Yeah, primarily it's the forecasters. It's actually through Scripps University out in San Diego. They're the primary. They've got grants and things that's one of their main focuses is researching those. So they want as much data as they can get. So in those particular missions, we fly as high as we can, usually around 33,000 feet, and we drop anywhere from 25 to 35 dropsons, just so they can get a huge sampling of the atmosphere. And a lot of times we'll fly one mission out of Hawaii and one mission out of the West Coast, normally Travis Air Force Base, before that kind of got overrun by COVID patients this year. But we'll fly to Portland because of that. So we'll kind of meet in the middle, and in one particular day, we might drop 50 sons between the two airplanes just to get a really good sampling of the atmosphere.
Has there been anything surprising that you've noticed out of flying out of those?
Not really. I would say there have been a couple times where the turbulence was a little bit more than I expected because they're very large systems. But most of the time, compared to the tropical systems, they're relatively benign. It's really just dropping sons and making sure the data is good. It's a busier flight because we have so much data coming into the plane that we're having to QC and send off. But I would say they're busier and less, not in a stressful way, but just a kind of a more tedious way.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey, got another question. You mentioned flying these atmospheric rivers. You fly fairly high, 30,000 feet or thereabouts. What are your typical altitudes for flying in and out of tropical systems?
Sure. So we have, from a tropical perspective, there are three profiles that we fly. The first is what's called an invest. That's when the Hurricane Center has seen a tropical wave or some disturbance that has the potential to become maybe a depression or more at that point. So we'll fly an invest, and those are pretty low. Those are about 500 feet to 1,000 feet, usually flown during the daytime. And at that point, we're just trying to find the circulation. So we're trying to find the appropriate wind in each quadrant of that area. Assuming we do, that's the data they use to upgrade those to a depression if the winds meet that criteria. For a depression or a tropical storm, if it's already to that point, we usually fly between 2,500 feet and 5,000 feet, depending on how strong the storm is. Recently it's been 2,500 feet because it's a lot easier for us to get the wind data that we're looking for to really find the center. But if it's a stronger tropical storm approaching hurricane strength, we'll bump it up to 5,000 feet for safety. And then for hurricane mission, we usually fly those at 10,000 feet.
Thanks.
So how hard is it to find that center, Captain, when you're looking for a developing system? Because I see y'all a lot of times moving around on the tracking, you're just trying to find that exact spot, looking for that wind shift. And it's so cool when you find it, Yeah,
it's a kind of a weird little science that I think you get better with age sort of to do it. If it's a Cat 5 hurricane, you know exactly where it is because it's a big old, the center of the eye. And you got the winds on your left side until they're on your right side. So you've done your job there. But yes, it's a lot more difficult when it's either an invest mission or a weak tropical depression, or maybe something that's starting to fall apart. That's where the interesting thing there that I'm still learning as part of the job, I think I'll probably be learning for the next 10 years is every circulation has small circulations within it. They kind of rotate around the broader circulations. So you have to make your way through those little get into the actual center of it. So it's a non-exact science. We're trying to find the lowest pressure that our systems are reading. The warmest temperatures is something else to look for. So yeah, it can be difficult.
And I noticed when, on the Vortex data messages, I used to always see the sea surface temperature, and Troy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I see that data anymore. Do you provide that data anymore? Do you measure the sea surface temperature, or is that something we have lots of other ways to get hold of now?
We use the sea surface temperature as part of our job, but as far as I know, we don't report it. That might come from the NOAA hurricane hunters. I think they might have different equipment. The equipment that we use to measure the surface is what's called the SMRF. It's the step frequency microwave radiometer. So it will tell us the brightness temperature, which ultimately gives us the wind speed. But no, we don't report the surface temperature.
So that's how you estimate the surface temperature. How do you get the flight level winds? What piece of equipment on the plane is telling you that?
It's called the pitot tubes. It's just a GPS system on the airplane that measures the winds.
So that's really cool. Now, you mentioned earlier some quality control checking on the drops on data. You're seeing this data in real time. How's it getting back to the Hurricane Center?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
So how do you get your data back to the Hurricane Center? Is it is it going over satellite uplink, over radio? Do you QC it before it goes to them? How does that work?
There's some data that sort of flows automatically on a continuous basis, but the official observations we take, like the VDM you talked about, like the drop sons, we take what's called a RECO, which is sort of like a current state observation. QC it, and then it does go over satellite comlink to them. It's a little bit of a dated technology. We're hoping to improve that going forward, but that's out of our hands.
And so you say you're in constant communication with the Hurricane Center over instant messenger, sort of, talking back and forth. Any interesting conversations that as a weather nerd, that you've ever had there that maybe you could share with us?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, I dropped out again.
Yeah, Fortnite may be winning a little bit.
I think so.
Any cool things that have happened as you're communicating with the Hurricane Center before, in real time in the field?
Well, it's just, I would say one of the coolest parts of the job is being able to communicate directly with the forecasters that have been doing this for decades, especially one of the cooler storms. I mean, they get to see our data as it happens. And they kind of get to control us a little bit like a video game. If they want us to go check out the Eastern Quadrant again or go head up north, and they can ask it. And as long as we are comfortable doing that for safety of flight, we'll do it. So they're always really good about it after a storm, particularly one that's, or after a mission, particularly one that was long, with a lot of ups and downs. They are very appreciative of the data that we provide them. So we develop a pretty close relationship over the years, for sure.
I have a
you
question.
you guys are heroes to us.
Oh,
I
appreciate that.
know that they are to you too, Taylor. So hit it.
Yeah, I was wondering for some of the younger meteorologists listening rather, you kind of talked about some of the health qualifications that you need to meet. Is there any specific classes, any specific areas of study that you'd recommend for someone who knows that they'd like to try to become a hurricane hunter?
From a health perspective, I mean, I'm not sure what there is to say about that. It's just kind of, obviously you want to be in shape, but you have to meet the Air Force requirements anyway. So a lot of the people that get screened out, it's something that's out of their control. It's a pre-existing condition or something like that, or maybe a problem with their eyes or their ears or something like that. But the first step is we rarely see people come off the streets. Usually they have a prior career with the Air Force or with some sort of military agency, because that's the first step to getting in the door. Is you've already proven to the Department of Defense that you are screenable to a certain degree, and then at that point it's just having the knowledge, having a degree. Doesn't matter where you go, just get a degree if that's something you want to do, and
In atmospheric sciences or meteorology, so
Sure.
that's the path. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually kind of an odd case, is because I mentioned that I went to James Madison University in Virginia, and they didn't. I'm not sure if they do now, but they didn't have a weather degree. I was actually pre-law when
Okay.
I became an officer.
They still
Recently,
don't. It's Virginia Tech.
Okay, yeah. Recently, I've gone back to Mississippi State and gotten my master's in meteorology, so now I can kind of take that monkey off my back. But yeah, any degree in atmospheric sciences, we've had people with GIS degrees that have gotten hired on. Something that shows technical skill and that kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
So is your family used to you flying into hurricanes, Captain?
Say it again.
Is your family used to you getting up and flying into a hurricane several times a year?
I don't think my wife will ever get used to it. The 12-year-old is starting to think it's really cool. Before he just thought I was going to work. And I've got a toddler who doesn't know where I go. But no, my wife, I don't think she's proud of me, obviously, but I'm not sure if she'll ever be super comfortable with it. And that's why I try to do a good job of texting before we take off and texting as soon as we land. And luckily, they can follow us. She can follow us online and see where exactly we are. And so that kind of puts her mind at ease a little bit.
When we watch that data on Google Maps and stuff, how real time is that? Is it delayed by so many minutes, or
I would say 10 or 15 minutes max, I would say. Yeah, especially Levi Cowan at Tropical Tidbits. I mean, he does a really good job of putting the latest stuff out there. So he's pretty on top of it.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. And having been amazed by hurricanes since Hurricane Camille in 1969. That was the first hurricane that I remember. Troy, I'm sure you were old enough to remember Hurricane Camille. I bet you got a Hurricane Camille story you could tell.
The Camille is the one that got me going too on the Mississippi coast, living in Mississippi at the time, up in North Mississippi. So growing up there in I think about the 7th or 8th grade. Yeah.
And James, I bet
there's some of us left that have memories of Hurricane Camille. Not many of us. We're getting old.
Yeah.
But I was 13 in 1969 listening to Nash Roberts. You guys ever heard of Nash Roberts? The legendary New Orleans meteorologist on WWL, Clear Channel 870. And what broke my heart was when the sun came. I stayed up all night listening to it. Exactly. And the sun came up and the sky wave went away and you couldn't hear it anymore. And it was just like, no, it was so.
You love nighttime hurricanes when we were
James.
kids.
James, what day of the week did Camille come ashore?
Saturday night.
No, Sunday night. Sunday night.
Monday
was very much remember that. Yeah.
I was at my grandmother's house up in St. Clair County, and obviously back then they didn't start school in the 1st of August like they do now. We'd start in, sometime in early September. So I was out of school and had nothing to do. And I mean, come on, I would have just kept on going. So, but that was a fascinating time. But Captain, I was going to ask you, tell me about, do you ever communicate with the NOAA research aircraft that go up into hurricanes? How's that coordination and collaboration work between you and NOAA?
We do. Sometimes we're in the air at the same time. We've actually passed them in the eye before, which is pretty interesting. And believe it or not, we actually have a member of our the Hurricane Hunters of the Air Force that is also a member of the Hurricane Hunters of NOAA. Traditional reservist on our side, and then she works for them full time. So we actually communicate quite a bit. We do different missions, broadly speaking, but especially if it's a Hurricane Dorian type situation where we're flying this thing. We definitely help each other out for sure.
The plan of the day, we see that from the Hurricane Center. Who coordinates that? Is that done exclusively at the Hurricane Center, or do you have a voice in that, or how does that work?
You're talking about coordinating what mission we fly or what profile we fly?
Yeah, every morning we get a plan of the day from the National Hurricane Center.
Correct.
Who comes up with that?
Yeah. It's a group of 3 guys. I don't know do you know the name Warren Madden? Does that strike a bell?
Weather Channel guy?
Yeah. Weather Channel guy.
Who is also a hurricane hunter?
Correct.
I think we're losing the captain
they're
to
basically
Minecraft.
the Hurricane Center forecasters and us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're starting to lose you now about once every 10 seconds, Captain, on the bandwidth here. It's coming and going pretty quick. But I wanted to ask about Dorian. Can you hear us okay now? Yeah, somebody is sucking that bandwidth, man. Bill, you got kids. You know the problem here, don't you? I mean,
yeah, that's when you knock on the ceiling. Hey, cut it out.
Get off the computer.
You're a bunch of whippersnappers.
Stand by 1 minute. Let me relocate. Just give me a second.
Okay. Yeah.
This is just fascinating. We've had a couple of hurricane hunters, but I don't know that we've ever gotten this deep into the the cool stuff,
I feel like you
James.
can just ask all the
Yeah.
questions you've always wanted to ask a hurricane hunter guy. So this is good. So yeah, this is great. We can see the captain moving locations now.
Well, James,
Now he's gonna.
I was sitting here a few seconds ago writing notes. I didn't know at what height I mean, I figured they varied the heights, but I didn't know you did something different in the formative stages versus the tropical storm, and then versus the strongest tropical cyclone. So I mean, we're learning stuff here.
All right, Captain, can you hear us okay now?
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right, I'm a little close. I'm a little closer to my router, and I gave the kids a dirty look, so hopefully we'll see.
Show title.
Yeah. So I heard the question, or I heard Troy mention the different levels. So for the formidable stages of the storm, what we're doing is we're really trying to visually with our eyes look out the window and see the winds we want. So at that point, some of the equipment goes out the window, figuratively speaking. Where so the lower you are, the better visual you have of the ocean surface, and that's where these things form. They form from the bottom up. So the stronger it gets, the higher you can go. Obviously for safety too. And 10,000 feet for a hurricane was determined to be the safest level based on lightning and icing and that kind of thing. Obviously you can't avoid the big thunderstorms in the eye wall, but yeah, the heights, the flight levels that we fly are pretty well determined ahead of time.
So let's be honest now. So let's you get a mission into an invest that's out in the Atlantic. It's going to be a fish storm. If it develops, it doesn't bother anybody. And you got Hurricane Dorian. I mean, is there any difference in the way you feel when you're getting ready to go on a mission between those two? You got this big, massive Category 5 and a dud in the middle of nowhere. I mean, do you have to psych yourself up for those little ones like that?
I think so. If I'm being honest with you, that obviously if it's a big storm that's approaching the Bahamas that's going to cause devastation, I mean, you realize the importance of what you're doing. You realize that your data is vitally important, especially if you've got media on board. Sometimes you've got people on the ground that are desperately waiting, not necessarily for our data specifically, but for the forecast that's based off of our data. So there is some pressure that goes with that for sure. But the nice thing about some of the earlier invests that maybe aren't going to affect anybody, it's more kind of a gee whiz mission. You get to kind of go back to your nerdy weather days and sort of just kind of enjoy yourself and relax and realize that there's not some, emergency planner who's waiting on your data to decide if he's going to evacuate a city. You're able to just sort of, let's analyze this beautiful creation of Mother Nature and see what it's going to do.
Hey, Kelsey, got one more question. What about after the mission? What kind of post-mission debriefing or hot wash-up do you guys do?
Well, there are two parts. One is the basic post-mission brief with our crew. So obviously we'll talk about how the mission itself went, but we also talk about any kind of equipment issues we had, any sort of problems we may have had with coordination with air traffic control, which is always interesting, especially as we get further off the coast. But then we very shortly after I land, I always call the folks at CARCA who work for the Hurricane Center, and we talk about, I give them our times, our takeoff time, our land time, our total flight time. We talk about any the good things that happened, maybe some of the things that didn't go so great, what we can clean up next time, and again, that's where they're really nice and grateful, and kind of say, hey, thanks for doing what y'all do. And the forecaster said that this particular set of data was really helpful. Thanks for that, kind of thing. And then we go home because, like I said, some of these missions get very, very long. So, and a lot of times, especially when we're forward deployed to like St. Croix or to Hawaii, flying these storms out there, we go immediately into crew rest, and 12 hours later we're back in the air. So rest is obviously pretty important.
Right.
Captain Troy again. You mentioned something briefly a second ago, and it just kind of triggered something in my brain, which is scary in the first place. But but you mentioned the lightning. And talking to some of the folks, and Chip Guard is a good friend. He just recently retired as the WCM at Guam, and I know Chip and some of the people out there. And he and I visited on the Pacific tropical cyclones. it seems like, and I don't know, James and Bill, we go back the furthest, that you think about these as being warm core systems, and they are. Tropical cyclones are. And I think for a long time, we really thought there wasn't that much lightning in these systems. And one thing we're finding out now is there's lightning. We saw it in Dorian last year, especially as it intensified. How much lightning do you see in these warm core tropical cyclones sometimes?
I wouldn't say it's prevalent, but I would say it's not unusual either. Typically, it's more noticeable at nighttime, obviously.
Yeah.
During the daytime, you're not going to hear thunder because the airplane is really loud.
Right.
So at nighttime, I mean, yeah, it depends. It really varies. Every storm is so different, and that's the one thing I've learned in my relatively short career thus far in this job is every storm is different. The minute you think that you know what category 4 hurricane is going to be compared to the last category 4 hurricane you flew, they're totally different. So a lot of it has to do with, again, going back to the land interaction or where it is in its process. Is it starting to weaken? Is it strengthening? Is it rapidly strengthening? That, I think a lot of that depends on what the air is doing and whether or not you're going to see lightning.
And I think too, probably, and help me if I'm wrong, someone slap me upside the head. But we're seeing a lot of this, I think, with the advent of the GO 1617 global lightning mapping, that where in the past we wouldn't have really been able to see this before. But I'm pretty amazed at, especially some of the tropical cyclones in the Western Pacific I've seen, with some of the lightning that we're seeing associated with intensification. So just thought I'd ask. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, sure. And I'd be curious, to see a study on what level that was taking place, whether it's below us or above us or right at the 10,000 foot flight level too. So
now, I've got a story about lightning and Hurricane Opal. Remember Hurricane Opal, fellas, ladies and gentlemen? 1995. So the late great J.B. Elliott was with me in the weather office. We were at the time I was working up on Red Mountain in Birmingham. And we said, let's go out and take a look. We just wanted to walk out the back and feel it. Sometimes you just want to experience the weather. Every weather dweeb just wants to get out in it. So JB, let's go. So JB and I went out there, and after maybe 30 seconds, we literally started to feel the hair on our arms going up, and we felt that twinge. And I'm thinking, and by the time we tried to bolt for the door, lightning hit that big WBRC sign on Red Mountain up there. And this was during Hurricane Opal. And I remember telling JB, hey, this is a tropical system. These things don't have any lightning. So ever since that event that nearly killed me, I will tell you, Troy, that they do have lightning. Yeah. And I witnessed it myself.
Well, one thing that, James, that I think is interesting, you see that a lot in talking to observers, especially in coastal areas. You see a lot of lightning. People will call you. Listeners or viewers will call TV and say, I see a lot of lightning. What they're not really seeing are exploding transformers and high-level winds that are causing power lines to blow down and things like that. They're probably not seeing that much lightning. But especially after landfall, I think you see an increase in that lightning as well. So glad you're still with us, James.
Yeah, I'm telling you. So Captain, I got to ask you. I'm going to ask you now. I get into the personal stuff. I get into the good stuff here. So
shoot, go ahead.
I know since you've been doing this, you've had some knuckleheads in the media on your flights, right?
No.
You've not had anybody from the media on one of your flights?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
But not knuckleheads.
Well, so we're all knuckleheads. I mean, we're all knuckleheads. So I would like to hear, number one, has anybody ever barfed on one of your flights and then from the media?
Yeah.
Well, I have to be careful because
no, I'm not asking for names. I'm just saying, has it ever happened?
Yes, it happened more than once.
Yes.
So it must be somebody famous then, if he wouldn't have said that. Let's guess who it was.
Yeah.
Now we can all guess. Was it male or female?
It was male.
Okay.
Ooh,
Okay.
Okay. Network or no?
Believe it or not, I saw a media member dead asleep during a Cat 4 hurricane eye wall penetration, which I thought
that was Brian Peters, but that's all right.
Yeah, by the time it was over, he was slouched over in the seat, and he was still asleep. So.
Did he have on black socks and Bermuda shorts? that was
Yeah,
definitely
that,
Brian.
that would that would clearly be Brian Peters.
That I cannot recall.
But it's
So-
a good idea, though, Captain. Right? Hefty bag, probably a good idea. Have you a bag, right? You know.
For sure, and a lot of times, just to be candid, I think the people that get sick, they don't necessarily get sick with the bumps; they get sick with the turns.
Yeah.
Because once we get into the eye wall and into the eye, we're doing some pretty high banks. That's where people get sick, because that's where you start pulling G's and that kind of thing. Where you just get bumped around, unless you're super sensitive to that kind of thing, you're not going to get sick.
So is it a distraction having somebody from the Weather Channel or ABC News or even a local station on board? Or are you so busy that you don't even notice they're there?
Usually they're pretty good. I mean, I've more than once I've said, "Hey, I'm going to get back to you," or "Can we do this in 15 minutes?" And they're pretty respectful. So I would say, I mean, earlier on when I was, really busy and really kind of learning the job, then it was stressful. But now it's we know it's part of the job, and we feel comfortable saying, "Hey, we can't do this interview right now. Maybe you should have a seat, and we'll do this in a little while," kind of thing.
Well, I'm telling you, I nominate Taylor to go on the next flight. Taylor, you're it.
Come on, let's go.
I'd love to do it.
See, I mean, I can see that
I'll
little
bring my
twinkle in
garbage
her-
bag though, just in case.
that twinkle in her eye. I'll never forget when during Hurricane Ivan, we were all sitting around the weather office arguing who's going to go. And I looked at Brian and said, "You're expendable. You go." So Brian went.
I actually, James, was on the way to Keesler at one point many years ago, and the mission was scrubbed.
Me too. Mine to the Eastern Pacific.
Yeah, mine was
that
scrubbed at the last minute, but I had the hefty bag with me, Taylor. I had the hefty bag with me.
Well, you'll be
Wow.
happy to know that we do provide bags if you need.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, doesn't get any better than that. Barf bags provided.
There you go.
So, and that's a show title.
Yeah.
So,
There you go.
Captain, I want to talk about going into Dorian's eye in the eye wall. I saw an image. I don't know if it was your flight. Somebody took a shot that was just stunning, and I know that the picture doesn't do it justice. What was it like in the middle of that unbelievable storm?
It was pretty incredible. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it referred to as the stadium effect before, and I was lucky enough. Again, lucky is a relative term. I saw in Maria a couple years prior was a big Cat 5 hurricane right as it approached Puerto Rico, and the stadium effect is just something that you've never seen before. I mean, it literally looks like the middle of like Notre Dame Stadium, where on all surrounding sides you've got these big towering ball clouds that are going 65,000 feet in the air with negative 80-degree temperatures, and then above that you have blue sky. And Dorian was the same way. Dorian was even better because it was so stationary by that, or close to stationary by that point, as it was over the Bahamas. And I know they even got some really good pictures from the ground too, which isn't always available for obvious reasons. But yeah, those storms, I mean, obviously the stronger the storm and the slower it's moving, it could give you a really impressive stadium shot for sure.
So you're at 10,000 feet. What's it like breaking out of the eye wall and getting into the eye? What's the sensation like in the plane?
Well, it's 10,000 feet pressure altitude. So you can imagine as soon as you break into the eye wall or through the eye wall, the center pressure is so low. A lot of times it's like a roller coaster where you can feel, I mean, you'll lose 2,000 feet of elevation just because of you're based on that pressure level. So unfortunately, I think the pilots get a much better view than I do. At that point, they're flying straight and they're waiting for me to tell them which way to turn. I'm the one who's like bouncing between looking out my window, checking this screen, checking that screen, and talking to the drop sign operator. So we're busy. We don't always get to enjoy the serenity of the eye, but it's busy for one thing. But sometimes, especially with the more developed storms, you kind of have to remind yourself to just take a breath and sort of just experience it and kind of get away from your screen for 1 second.
It would seem like a lot of these missions are fraught with danger to the layperson, that they're not aviators. And I understand you do this often, and maybe it's routine. But what are some of the greatest hazards or risks that you face every time you go up on a mission?
Um, well, I'll give you a specific answer and I'll give you a more broad answer. The specific answer is you don't want to fly into a mesocyclone. Because a lot of times, if you get too much of a tailwind, and this has happened before, not with me, but it's one of the things that the pilots specifically are trained about. If you fly into the wrong part of the eye wall where your tailwind exceeds your forward speed, a stall is very, very possible. And you don't want to stall when you're at 10,000 feet pressure altitude, and already losing altitude because of the drop in pressure. So that's a very specific thing that we're looking out for. Other than that, fatigue plays a role, especially when it's a long mission or a nighttime mission. We fly at all different kinds of hours. So we might have a 2 a.m. takeoff, and you're supposed to sleep the best you can during the day before that. But obviously, especially with kids, I mean, it's hard to do sometimes. So fatigue plays a massive role, I would say. And then just the airplane itself. I mean, the airplane that we fly, it's WC-130J. It's one of the newer C-130s out there, but it's still 25 years old. So you just obviously we've got great maintainers, and everybody is trained to do their job the best they do, and they do that. But some things you can't control, and that's kind of the biggest thing to worry about is what happens if we're way out in the Pacific Ocean and we start leaking fuel, or one of the engine flames out and we're 600 miles from land. So that's the kind of thing you think about.
So what is your range? I hear this all the time, but when does it get within range of the hurricane hunters, these tropical systems? What's the practical range?
Well, it depends on where it is. So if it's a tropical wave way out in the Atlantic, we will hopefully have enough heads up to forward deploy a couple days before to St. Croix to give us that extra range, and then we can fly 500 or 600 miles out further to the east before turning around. And then same thing with the Eastern Pacific. If it's pretty close to the California coast or the Baja Peninsula, we can fly it out of Keesler. But if it's starting to approach Hawaii, we'll forward deploy, fly around the storm to get to Hawaii, and then operate out of there. And
you don't have to refuel going from Keesler all the way to Hawaii then?
We normally stop at Travis Air Force Base in California.
Okay.
We could fly in one shot if the winds were right, but it's probably not the smartest thing to do. So almost always we'll stop halfway.
Your scariest moment so far?
I kind of mentioned it earlier. I would say that's probably the scariest. Was, I think, like I said, it was either Madeline or Lester back in 2016 in the Eastern Pacific, where some really, really hot shot pilots sounded pretty uncomfortable. So again, for a new guy, I was like, holy crap, what the heck's going on? So that was pretty scary. I would say it wasn't like scary in the moment, but looking back when I flew Hurricane Maria as it was approaching Puerto Rico, I mean, we could look down and see all these little beach towns along Puerto Rico, and then to know the devastation that happened afterwards. I mean, obviously, Puerto Rico was totally destroyed by Maria, so that was kind of very, very somber and sobering after the fact.
Do you ever have an interest in going back and looking at what happened on the ground? Let's say after Maria, going to Puerto Rico, or Dorian going to the Bahamas. Have you ever done that before, or does that interest you at all?
I have done it because we do the Hurricane Awareness Tour every year, and the Caribbean Hurricane Awareness Tour. So the HAT and the CHAT. Obviously, it was canceled this year. But a lot of times we'll go to places that just the year prior were pretty well devastated. And even down here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, I mean, there's some areas that still haven't recovered from Katrina. And I know areas in the panhandle of Florida are still going to recover from Michael for the next several years. And obviously the Bahamas won't be the same for probably a decade. So a lot of the places we visit, you can tell, not just in the physical landscape, but all the people that you interact with that have been through devastating storms before. You hear stories and they pass those stories on to their kids and stuff like that. So you kind of get the residual effects of it by visiting those places, which we do every year.
And I know you've been with us a long time. A few more questions. Let's say you got a Camille again, Category 5, coming right up toward the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Obviously, that's going to affect your operations. You've got to do something. What happens? Where do you disperse? What goes on if you have to evacuate Keesler?
Well, the two primary locations are Ellington Field, which is outside of Houston, or Savannah. So depending on where the cone is, where it's likely to go, and obviously we can adjust. I mean, we're pretty flexible. I don't think anybody's going to turn us down. If we have to go somewhere else, they're not going to say, sorry, you can't come here. So it depends. We have a threshold and a period of time that we have to make those decisions to decide where we're going to go. So yeah, it depends on where it's going. But Ellington is one of our most common, especially if the storm is headed towards Mississippi and includes Alabama and the Panhandle of Florida. We'll normally operate out of Ellington and get all of our planes out of here.
What's the one right by Panama City Beach that was hit by Michael? What military installation was that? Was that Air Force?
It was Tyndall, yeah.
Tyndall, yeah. Have they recovered at all? Do we know? I mean, I've not heard anything about, this. They often don't talk much about what happens in government facilities like that, but it looked like it took a rough hit with that thing.
The only thing I'll say is that I've heard that a complete rebuild is not planned at this point.
Wow. So again, on a flight, and maybe you said this earlier, but I was busy with some storms. All my storms are over now, thank goodness. How many crew members do you have on a typical mission on that C-130?
Sure. 5 is our base number of folks. We've got 2 pilots and a navigator up front, the RWO, myself, and then the loadmaster. So that's 5. And then sometimes we'll double up on a position if it's going to be a long flight. Usually the pilots will do that because they've got a bunk up there that they sort of rotate out and take rests. So I would say 5 to 7.
What's the camaraderie like? I mean, you guys have to laugh a little bit. I mean, you got to have a little fun up there. I mean, those missions are brutally tough. I mean, if you can't laugh, there's no hope. I mean, you got to have some fun sometimes.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's one of the cool things about this. I mentioned earlier that, it's a reserve job, but it's inside the reserves. There are several full-time positions available. So a lot of the people that fly with us have done it for 15, 20 years. So you'll fly with the same people pretty regularly, not just on storm missions, but also training missions. So that's one of my favorite parts of the job is the camaraderie you mentioned, and just the trust you have in your crew members. I mean, when I mentioned the time that I was nervous in that storm in the Pacific was because I had so much respect for those pilots and I knew that I was in good hands. So if they were having some apprehension, then I knew it was time to worry, because everybody's trained really, really well. Everybody takes their job super seriously. So the crew gets along great. And like I said, believe it or not, there are plenty of downtimes during a hurricane mission where you do get to kind of relax and tell stories and sort of recover in between each pass through the storm.
Awesome. So one more, and I promise we'll let you go. For people that are listening or watching this, maybe they're interested in, a tour or seeing. I know that you guys do the preseason tour where you come to different locations. Is there any other opportunity during the season itself at the Air Force Base, or is it just closed to the public there?
It's pretty well closed to outside of government officials and media members. But you mentioned the Hurricane Awareness Tour that we do every year. It alternates between the Gulf and the East Coast of the United States. And then the Caribbean Hurricane Awareness Tour bounces around between different locations in Central America and the Caribbean. But we also do air shows as well. Actually, I think Chris went to an air show recently where one of our planes was at. And unfortunately, I wasn't there. I would love to see him. But we try to do air shows as much as we can too, because it kind of, augments our hurricane awareness tours. I mean, it's kind of like a mini hurricane awareness tour when we're able to go to air shows.
Awesome. So let's say, again, Taylor's already asked the question about a young person wanting to get into this, but if somebody wants to get into the reserves, what's the process? How many hours is required for a reserve member of service?
Sure. So, there's the active duty Air Force and then there's the Guard and Reserve. I've done both. I've done all three really. So the Guard and Reserve, the starting process is just to find a recruiter. And the bare minimum of what you have to do, depending on what your job is, you have to go to basic training or officer training school, depending on whether or not you have a degree and are pursuing having a commission. And then you get trained in whatever your job is. So it depends on what it is. It could be as short as a few weeks if you're going to focus on finance or accounting or maybe something medical. But something like Intel or meteorology, the training courses are a lot longer. But then once you finish that, then you revert to your standard. The basic requirement for a Guard and Reserve member is 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summertime. Traditionally summertime, it depends, but that's kind of that's your bare like legal requirement. And then after that, it's just a matter of what you do, where you are, and how much you want to work.
And finally, the big question: what will the rest of the hurricane season be like? We want you, the man that flies into these suckers. You got your hands on these things. You can feel them. What are we going to have in July, August, and September? Above average, below average? Where do they form? Who's affected? What are your thoughts? We want to hold you to it. You demand.
Well, I always tell people that as soon as I took this job, I turned in my forecast card and I became a really high speed observer. But I will say it's going to be busy. And I hope everybody is prepared. I think we're in neutral to La Nina conditions, which means a busier Gulf and Atlantic season. And I think that's going to play out. So I hope everybody's prepared. I think it's going to be a busy. We started early. We're in a bit of a lull now, but I think as the season progresses, it's going to get pretty busy.
Well, dust out there. Well, Captain, thanks for coming on the show. This was fantastic. You've been a great guest.
I apologize for the problems earlier.
No, you made that move, man. We were right on it. Now you've not dropped out one time. You must be sitting at the router there.
Yeah, my kids are terrified now. So
that's a good thing, Captain.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Captain. Appreciate it, and good luck this season. And we'll be watching your data.
All right, appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, thanks a lot.
Captain.
See ya.
All right, so let's take a quick break here. We're going to do Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We're going to come back with an email segment from Aubrey. She's in the middle of a newscast right now, but if not, we'll do picks of the week. We've got the weather roundup. We've got much more coming up as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
As the sun beats down on our backyard barbecues this weekend, the sun may seem at its closest, but it's actually at its furthest. Saturday morning, July 4th, Earth will be at aphelion, its furthest point from the sun in that year-long not-so-circular orbit. It'll be another 3 million miles closer on January 2nd, 2021, perihelion. While being the furthest from the sun in the winter months might make a little more sense to the 12% of the world's population that live in the southern hemisphere, proximity to the sun has very little to do with temperatures or seasons. It's the ebb and flow of the number of hours of sunlight, and that's ultimately governed by the tilt of Earth's axis, of course. That and 3 million miles is not that much. It's only about 3.5% further away. Another seemingly counterintuitive observation is that global temperatures are about 4 degrees Fahrenheit higher around this time when Earth is at its furthest from the sun. The reason lies in the distribution of land and water across our planet. Now, you may have heard that Earth is about 70% water, but that's a global average. There's a lot more land mass above the equator than below. As any good meteorologist knows, especially those that are near a coastline, land heats up much more easily than water. The northern hemisphere receives the most sunlight around aphelion. The ratio of land to ocean there is also about 1 to 1.5. Down in the southern hemisphere, it's closer to 1 to 4. The flip side is that all that ocean makes for much more moderate climates in the southern hemisphere, thanks to all that stored heat energy. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Before we do picks of the week in the email inbox, I'm going to grill Taylor right now. Taylor, are you ready?
No.
Oh,
Rapid
man.
fi-
Sorry,
rapid fire. See, she'll never come back on the show again.
Oh, Lord. Now I got to find somebody for September 14th. Thank you.
No. These are harmless questions. I mean, so you
Rod
are
Pepper.
Saved by another episode of Tony Rice.
hit the wrong button. No, so you were part of the upcoming generation, the next generation of meteorologists. And first off, you decided for a college, you chose the University of Georgia. Why? John Knox.
Well, yeah, partly John Knox, also Dr. Marshall Shepard. There's a lot of great professors there, but the program is actually very small, which was really good for me because you get a lot of one-on-one interaction with the professors. It was a great school. They really focus on the math, the science. I didn't get a lot of time working on a green screen, anything like that. I didn't really learn anything TV until I did an internship through college. But if you like the math and the science, UGA is a great school where you're going to get to work with a lot of really intelligent professors. So,
John and Marshall are the greatest, and I have been there. It is a marvelous program. So, talk about your career. You started out of college. You went to Dothan, Alabama. Yes. Explain that, because a lot of people listening, they're afraid of that. They're afraid of, I'm going to be in a small town and I'm not going to be making a lot of money and I'll be there forever. And I don't. What was it like in Dothan? I love Dothan. What was your experience like in that first job out of college?
It was a great first job. Really nice people, made a lot of new friends. And one of the things too is when you first start out, there's a lot of people generally when you're going to one of these smaller cities, you'll meet a lot of people that are in the same situation as you are. They're moving away from their friends, their family to come to a new job. And it forces you to go see a part of the world that you might not have ever thought you'd live in, which is great. You know, you get
the
to
Wiregrass.
Yeah. Do they call it that still, Taylor?
Oh, yeah.
I got chewed out on the blog for writing that one day.
Really?
Somebody said, nobody knows where that is. And I'm like, if you've lived in Alabama more than 2 weeks, you know where the Wiregrass is.
Oh, yeah. I always called it the Wiregrass. But I was down there for about 6 months, was the chief at WDHN. And then I actually, job opened up in Mobile, and I wanted to go work with Alan and the team down there. And so I went. And
Alan Seals, this is back when Alan was at Channel 5.
Yes.
And tell us about your Mobile experience. This is before you joined us.
Yeah, I learned a lot, worked a lot of crazy hours, did some tropical stuff, learned a lot from the team there on messaging. And Alan does a really good job of being really clear and concise with his messaging. So I learned a lot from him on that.
And has Alan landed a job yet?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Where's he now?
He works for us, our company. He's at Channel 15, WPMI, the Sinclair station in Mobile. In fact, Alan and I, we did a Sinclair hurricane season special last week. And so it was very good. We had a great time. That was a lot of fun. So here's my hard question, Taylor, before we move on here. So I'm an old guy. I've been doing this a long time. When you are my age, what will this business be like?
Oof. It's hard to know.
You're the smartest person I know. I'm trying to get an answer to this. What are your thoughts?
Something that's interesting. I mean, everybody, I'm in my mid-20s and all my friends, they don't watch TV. I mean, that's not a surprising thing. We all are OTT, this and that. But my friends will say, oh, yeah, we saw you do the weather. And I was like, oh, you watch the news? No, we saw it on Instagram. Oh, we saw it on Facebook. So it's not. It's going to be different. It's just trying to adapt and stay ahead of the curve.
And I have to admit, I just missed something there. What does OTT mean, if that's what you said, Taylor?
Oh, all those like Roku, Hulu, all those kind of things.
What does it stand for?
Over the top.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. OTT.
Now, if you're in the TV business, the first thing they'll say, what is your OTT strategy? What? No, so many people have just stopped. I mean, everything is changing. Everything is changing. The number of people that subscribe to Dish or DirecTV dwindling, cable subscribers dwindling. They're moving away from those expensive traditional options to an OTT system, Roku, Fire Stick, Chromecast, Apple TV, all these things. And within that, they might buy YouTube TV, for example, which gives them basically cable and all the local channels for $49 a month and unlimited DVR. I feel like I'm doing a commercial for YouTube TV. We've got that at our house, and it's great. It has AI, and it kind of starts to figure out what you like, and what pops up on the screen when you bring it up. It's kind of what you're interested in watching. It's a radically different experience, and it's $49 a month, where you're paying almost $200
right.
with these other guys. And so, but within that OTT experience, the local channels have a presence. Our company, which is Sinclair, they have an OTT app called Stir, STIRR, and that's where our products are. And other companies have different solutions. But yeah, again, I'm not a negative on the future. I think where Taylor is going to wind up is going to be a whole lot better than where I am right now. But we just don't know what that is. But so Taylor, you've been very successful. You're quite young. You're now in a top 50 market. Your advice for a high school kid that's listening to this show that wants to do what we do, your academics, second to none. Your work ethic, second to none. What's some stuff you can tell the younger people that are listening or watching that might help them?
Just be prepared to work hard, be prepared to study hard. You don't, and you'll learn it pretty quickly. You don't go into meteorology because you want to be on TV. You do it because you love math, you love science, and you want to help people, and you want to help keep people safe. So just be prepared to work hard, and don't not pursue this field because maybe you're not the number one in your class. You can work hard and you can study, and you don't have to be the smartest person in the class in order to be able to be a meteorologist, as long as you have that work ethic and you're willing to put in the hours and a lot of long nights.
How many times has Taylor said math in her answers?
Heard it several times.
Some math.
A lot of math. UGA, man. A lot of math.
You ought to see Taylor's notes. I have never seen any human being that takes the quality of notes that this young woman has taken, and she kept them. I mean, it's like
they're all in my desk.
I mean, it's like, when I take notes, it's like chicken scratch, hieroglyphics or something. And I mean, you're like a calligrapher. I mean, if you always had good handwriting.
Helps with memorization. I realized that if I would write things in different colors, I'd get to the test and I could kind of recall information better based on the color I wrote it in.
All right. So let's see. And Taylor, you got to go. So we'll let you go. But before we do that, in fact, Aubrey will be here. But let's just get your pick of the week right now. For the rest of us, we'll do it later. But you got to. What time do you get up, by the way?
Usually about 1:45 ish.
And it's 9:26.
Yeah,
so.
Really.
Good night.
Yeah, it's time. So you got to give us
every night 3 hours.
You got to give us a pick of the week.
Oh, my pick of the week is actually, I sent you this link, was it like a week and a half ago? YouTube video of Castle Williams. He was a student at UGA. He actually, this was his dissertation defense, and he did it on messaging of the SPC outlooks. Yep. And so he studied how changing the colors, changing the hues of the colors, changing the wording, how different people perceive that. So I thought it was really interesting, a lot of great information. He did it for different markets as well, Atlanta, Birmingham, and then out in Oklahoma. And it was interesting to see how people perceived the outlook and how we can maybe more clearly message that to the viewers and have that consistent message. So it's an interesting watch if you have time.
Okay, that'll be we'll put it up on the website. But Castle is a great guy. We've worked together on some projects, and he's a very smart guy. So Taylor is going to be with me during tornado outbreaks. I look back over the years and all the people I've had with me. I've had some good ones. John Olshoe, Bill, he was one of the first ones, and then
I worked with him in Mobile.
Yeah, John. We got to get John back on this show sometime. We got to get John on the show sometime. I mean, John's a gazillionaire. He's got 5 houses down there. He fishes all day, and I don't know what he does, but we got to get him on the show. But John was with me for a while, and then we had, of course, Mark Prater, Jason Simpson, and Jason and I happened to cross paths. Our paths crossed during that horrible generational tornado outbreak in 2011, and we will always be bonded for that. And then Charles Daniel, and so now you and me. So we're going to see how it goes. So Taylor, thanks a lot for staying up late. So we'll talk to you tomorrow morning. For those that don't know, I do a little segment with her every morning at 6:15 on Good Morning Alabama. So you take a nap, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Taylor.
Bye.
Thanks for being on, Taylor.
All right. So
September.
Let's see if Aubrey, by chance, do you have a minute for an email segment here?
I believe I can do a quick email.
All right. So if you can do that, And just maybe Aubrey is going to dive into the email inbox.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. So a couple came in today. Patrick Allen. Hey, everyone. Love joining into the live show on YouTube each week. Let's see. I've been listening to some old podcasts during each day. Came across a very familiar topic, Saharan dust, during the October 16th, 2006 episode. JB Elliott is an absolute joy to listen to as well. Wish he was still around. That's from Patrick Allen of Hazel Green, Alabama. So thank you, Patrick. We appreciate that. And for everyone not believing us that Saharan dust is nothing new, it's an episode in October of 2006. So we've got that there for you. All right, this one from our friend Jeremy Bauer, who I need to give a big shout out to, by the way, because I bought a new camera to go storm chasing with. Obviously, that did not happen, but I have many numerous questions. And Jeremy has been very patient with me and has helped me out quite a bit. So big shout out to Jeremy Bauer. Thank you for putting up with my endless questions. And on to his email. Happy National Camera Day. The camera is inevitably a way of part of our lives that has changed the way many of us view the world presently. It's played a pivotal role in the field of meteorology from its usage and thunderstorm and tornado analysis, from the great Ted Fujita to the influential teachings of storm spotting techniques by Al Mohler. So we appreciate that. And Jeremy sent us a beautiful photo from near Chugwater, Wyoming in June of 2016. So thank you very much, Jeremy. Have a listener survey response from Rick coming in from Michigan. We appreciate you listening and watching to us. And that is all I have. So if you have an email, guest suggestion, fun information, a cool link you want us to take a look at, or you would like to share, email at weatherbrains.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Weather roundup, real quick. Tropics are quiet. Bill, we had a tornado warning in our part of the world Saturday evening. How rare is that?
Well, it was really rare and something I didn't expect. And
no,
just
nobody
no
was
shear,
expecting that.
no anything. So you think it was a tornado, James?
No, because there was no damage. I mean, if you had a tornado, you'd have some damage. A tree would be blown over somewhere, but not a tree down, not a limb. But we had 3 different tornado warning polygons for North Alabama Saturday night for one county, basically.
Right.
It was Cullman County, which has had a rich history of tornadoes. And I will say, and I'm not faulting the Weather Service. I probably would have done the same thing.
A lot of pictures.
Pictures and
creepy looking
video
clouds.
just rolling in, and most of it was scud, and it was clear rotation, but it was slow, and it was going up in the updraft. And Brian was working the Saturday night shift here, so he went on television, and I was on Facebook. We kind of merged our coverage. I was home, which goodness, I could have been anywhere, but that was interesting. That doesn't happen that often. Did you guys see that it snowed today in some of the high terrain in Idaho?
Yes, I'm trying to post a story to our website because we've got this new server where I can basically go into our sister station wherever, and I can copy the story and post it to our website. So I'm in the middle of trying to do that. But yeah, they've got, so let me read you what the article has, because they have some phenomenal photos. 6 inches of snow in some spots of Idaho.
Wow.
Galena Summit saw more than 6 inches of snow at approximately 8,700 feet.
If I'm good, I might be able to show some video for those people that are actually watching here. Eric, is that the meteorologist out there? Aubrey, do you know his name?
I don't know. The article was written by, Eric Brill.
Yeah, Eric. He put this out on the tweeter, and whoops, hang on here. And it's just to me it's just something about it is just soothing when you watch snow video and it's 90 something degrees wherever you are. So let's see if I can do a screen share here.
So can I say we got to Montana about June 10th last year, and it snowed our first day. Yeah, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, this is Eric's video, and I think he shot this. I think he went up there, and obviously this is a high pass. I think the elevation up there is like 7,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But
what
how
was the point of
cool
the
is
dollar
this?
bill in that first shot? What was that about?
I guess it's to show how deep the snow is.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's as deep as a dollar
Oh.
bill. We're going to have to add that to the NWS criteria.
Oh, I see. Now I
Deep-
see this.
Deep as a dollar bill. That's a good show title.
Yep.
That's how we know we
But
get
no,
snow in Alabama, when it's deep as a dollar bill.
Yeah.
So
So
the guy
anyway,
from
that,
WZTK would never let us live that down, would he?
Mm-mm.
James?
He said,
there's
while
an
the
am-
snow isn't the most uncommon thing to see in southern Idaho for late June, the amount of snow within the storm is quite uncommon.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So that was going. There's this cold trough back in the Northwest, and again, we'll see. That's the reason there's some tornado activity, I think, in the Dakotas tonight, kind of
Mhm.
where that air is pushing into the warm, muggy air. So, but down here where we are, Bill, we're just hot, humid, scattered afternoon thunderstorms. This is where you just want to record a forecast and leave for 2 months and come back and
Well,
let's
we
start
have
the
a
fall.
we have a friend who lives in the Norwood part of Birmingham who is afraid of drought, like I mean, petrified of drought because he has a prize-winning garden.
Yeah.
And when your video this morning, James said 30-40% chance of rain this week, basically, and the weather service of Birmingham's got some 80% chances out there, and he thinks 80% means you're going to get 3 inches of rain.
whoop.
And so I constantly have to remind him, 80% means you may only get 1/100th, but there's a really high probability that you'll get it. And, so anyway, he
Summer
wanted an
convection is
explanation of
impossible.
that. But I got
Summer convection is
1.79 inches tonight. So I'm thrilled because that means that's
Yes.
4 more days I don't have to water the grass.
I've given up on trying to be cute with summer convection. 5 days in advance. Ooh, we're going to bump up the pops.
5 hours in advance.
Yeah,
Jeez.
it's like you don't know. I mean, everything that determines the placement and the coverage of random air mass convection, it's mesoscale. You don't know what that's going to be like like Bill said, you don't even know what it's going to be like later in the day. Today, the reason Bill got that heavy rain, it was these amazing colliding outflow
Outflows,
boundaries.
yeah.
They just
I had
merged
given
right
up.
over his place.
I didn't think we would ever see anything today. And then
And-
when I saw it happening, I'm like, there's a chance. And then it just happened, just all had to come together right over us,
Yeah.
or you wouldn't have gotten it.
All right, let's do picks of the week. Picks of the week. Let's go to let's see, Jen. You got to have a good pick of the week for us. I have a funny feeling because you are always
She
on
always
time and you
does.
always send in your email early.
I do. Please forgive me. I have to have another Tornado Talk mom moment with this pick from one of our crew. It's Nelson Tucker, has written his first major summary for the website. And he has poured his heart and soul into the community of Smithville, Mississippi. And months upon months digging into the EFI that happened on April 27th. It is a really, really excellent summary. And just pretty much tells the story of what happened for that community and in-depth information. And he's 17. He's going to be a senior in high school. Him and all the kids on the Tornado Talk server, they're going to be mad at me. I'm going to hear it now, calling them kids, but they're kids to me because I'm mom. They are great. The amount of information that they know and how they're digging into these events, and it's a passion for them. And this really comes through on the summary. So it's about the Smithville, Mississippi EF5. I have the link for you, and go to our website onto the calendar and you can find it there on April 27th. It's really, really good.
Jen, I got to tell you, you sent that to us, and I'm going to tell you, you read Nathan's first paragraph. You will not leave that web page. You will not leave that till you get to the last paragraph. What a job he did. It's amazing.
So has he met Johnny Parker, Jennifer?
I don't know if
virtually?
he met him or just talked to him. I'm not sure.
We need to put him in contact with each other.
Yeah. I
No,
know
Johnny
he-
had commented on his article
He
earlier.
Oh,
did.
good.
Yeah, he shared it and said he thinks about this every day, this event, because Johnny was mentioned in this summary. And it was just, it's amazing. He went out and wrote to folks and talked to people to get permission to use photos. And because he wanted to tell this story about this community that he feels was a little bit lost on that day.
Wow.
And he wanted to make sure that the story was told. It's amazing.
Well,
Awesome.
something interesting comes out of this sort of stuff all the time. But Jen and I spoke early this morning, and James, she wanted me to go back. She asked the question, who's got any of JB's photographs? And I do have some that Judy gave me, safely protected in a box. And I thought that's not the place for them. So I ordered a slide scanner today, and I'll have it, because we got to see what we got in there. And get those out, because the kids, as you refer to them, these amazing scientists that work with you, Jenna, need this information. So I'm going to get those out and get them scanned and get them back to them, because they want to know about GU in Alabama, James, and the super outbreak. And
hey, Jen,
they want to go back and see those pictures.
They do.
Can I ask you a question, Jen? I'm Bill's going to kill me. James will as well. But would Nathan be willing to come?
Nelson?
I'm Nelson. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Nathan. Nelson,
okay.
would he be willing to come in here and talk to us about this article? I think it'd be amazing to hear from the young man.
Certainly, I should probably look. He's probably listening right now. They listen live and watch live.
Nelson, I apologize.
If you're watching, Nelson, just Zoom bomb us right now.
Yeah.
So here's the other cool lesson that he could really share is we have a lot of student meteorologists or newer meteorologists who are working for TV stations who have to write, and maybe they're not fantastic writers. So I think if he could maybe share his example of good storytelling, researching an article that he lives nowhere around, and he got all of this information to put together a great piece. And I hope a lot of our students and younger meteorologists are listening to this and look up Nelson's article. This is what you should be looking at as you write some of your pieces. These are the stories you should really be trying to tell when you're writing your pieces. It makes you a much better writer, and you can tell these stories.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to Ann Aubrey. She knows what she's
That's
talking
right.
about.
Ann Aubrey. If you go to the end of his summary, the list of articles that he read, he goes through the damage assessment toolkit to pull images. He had an article in there from Kim, that a research article. I mean, he did his due diligence to tell this story. So I'll talk to him about it and let you guys know.
Yeah. All right, Troy, what's your pick of the week? Go.
I will tell you that if you never see me on Face of Earth after tonight, or I'm getting audited by the IRS, there could be a reason. I found this a couple of days ago, and this is really interesting. And it's not that the National Blend of Models hung the moon, because it doesn't. One model may not be good one day and one not good, but the Earth System Research Laboratory has created an NBM, a National Blend of Model 1D viewer. Now, I'll tell you, on the top of the page, it says limited distribution, experimental for testing only. But as we speak, I'm hitting the button and send it to all of you. And James, I put Birmingham in there. You can put any city, major city. It's like a MOS, but it's a viewer. And it really is kind of cool. Not that, again, the NBM hung the moon, because it doesn't. Models are only as good as models are good, and when they're good, but it is kind of a good site, and I recommend.
Well, this is the third time it's happened in WeatherBrains history that we've issued something that we weren't supposed to issue.
Really?
So, yeah. Well, the other two times.
That's okay. we got to get Jeff Craven on this show. That's his baby, and Jeff, the guy that does the NBM.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but it's actually the folks over at the Earth System Research Laboratory, the model development branch, has put it together. And Jeff would be a good contact. Jeff's a good guy and could tell us all about it. I just think the viewer's kind of neat.
Okay, cool.
We did that one time, James. What was that program that the Weather Service
had?
I
Win, or
I Win.
Yeah,
That's right.
That.
And
yeah.
they shared it with us, and we like 50,000 people went and signed up for it.
We let it out to the world, and nobody was supposed to know about it. So they were not happy with us. And I think I was audited that year. So
okay.
My pick, it's for the Department of Earth and Climate Sciences from San Francisco State University.
Yeah.
You're often looking for these college sites with really good data, and that's kind of a diamond in the rough out there. They've got these amazing composite products, graphics that are really good. So I'm going to use that as my pick of the week. And again, all these picks will be up on weatherbrains.com. Let's see, Aubrey. What you got
Yes.
for us?
So mine is a tweet from the NWS Eastern region, and there's a link in here from the World Meteorological Organization. The committee recorded, or at least officiated, a record for the longest duration for a single lightning flash, which is 16 seconds.
Ooh.
16 seconds.
I don't believe it. Come on, man.
So, of course, this is all in South America. So that was from Argentina. And of course, the longest lightning flash, October 2018. One, keep in mind, we do not have very long records for this stuff. So these only go back, several years. What I think is fascinating when you look at the image, and I'm assuming from the GOES lightning mapper, it is literally the lightning outline of the anvil crawler, which just looks phenomenal. I had no idea we could do that.
Yeah, I saw that piece. That is very interesting.
Mind blown.
So again, we'll link up that on weatherbrains.com. All right, Bill, Wet Willie on the show next week. We're gonna do some music on here next week.
Next week's show is going to be crazy. I mean, yeah, we've got Jimmy Hall and his harmonica, the lead singer and a mastermind of Wet Willie. That we're going to talk to at the beginning of the show. That's going to be incredible. Our old friend Ken Carey is going to join us as a guest panelist too.
That's awesome. That's
who
awesome.
We just love and adore. Looking forward to that. And Jeff Garman, who's just installed at the National Weather Service in Juneau, Alaska, will be our guest weather brain. So and I've got a secret guest sponsor, so we got to talk about that, James.
Ooh.
So I may have some news about that coming
Okay,
up. So that'll involve another guest that we know and love. And so we're going to have lots to talk about. We got a lot of great guests coming up here in the next few weeks. And keep the old foghorn lubed up for me, James. Give me a little sound of that. I love that sound every week. Got to make sure that thing's still working. Now, that was kind of low there. Could you hear that, Troy? Yeah, there we
That's
go.
better.
There we go.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And Aubrey,
All
did
right.
you get my text, my 2-day late text?
I did, and I still have that email to send you, and then you still have that information to send me. So I did. I appreciate it.
Something
It's
I'm
okay.
supposed to send. I
No.
did. I don't have it, I don't think.
Oh, you don't have it still?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have it. I'm sorry.
Okay, but you're working on it?
I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong thing. Maybe you better email me again.
Wow. All right. We got to go. Y'all work this out later here. We got to go, man. I got to go to Studio A. Listen, Weather Brains is typically on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. And we are so glad that you watch. A lot of people watch live, but we know that most of you listen. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. All these picks of the week, the show notes on the website, weatherbrains.com as well. So we'll talk to you guys next week. On behalf of the entire Weather Brains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds good.
No worry
Have
on
a
the
great
Nathan
night.
there. They're all excited.
Sorry
They're like
about that,
they're going
Jen.
crazy on
Oh,
the
yeah.
Discord.
Going
here.
crazy.
That's awesome. Tell
We need, like, a
I'll
live
jump in there
photo.
tomorrow when I can. When I
Oh,
get
they
some
would
time.
love it. They would love it.
We'll see you all
Thanks,
next week.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye.
week.